The first time I realized I might be falling for her, I was holding a tray of lemonades and dropped every single glass. The crash echoed through the house like a confession I hadn't made yet. Her name was Lena Caldwell, and she was supposed to be my future sister-in-law. And I, the messy, sarcastic, perpetually single younger sister, was supposed to be happy for them. But God, I wasn't. It started that summer when I came back home to Maplewood, a small town in Pennsylvania where everyone still knew everyone else's business. My brother Ethan was getting married, my mom was ecstatic, and I had just broken up with my girlfriend in New York. I told myself I came home to help with the wedding plans, but part of me knew I was just running away from the mess I'd made of my life. Ethan met Lena through work. She was a graphic designer, polished, graceful, and completely unlike the type of women I usually fell for. There was something about her calmness that unnerved me. The way she listened, like every word you said mattered. The first time I saw her, she was standing in our kitchen barefoot, laughing with my mom while stirring something on the stove. She looked up, saw me, and smiled like she already knew all my secrets. That smile, it was dangerous. "Riley, you're home," she said, voice bright as sunlight. And I froze for a moment too long, caught off guard by the warmth in her eyes. "Yeah," I said, awkwardly tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Didn't realize the fiancé came with a cooking degree. She laughed, that kind of soft, throaty laugh that fills the space between two people and makes it impossible to look away. "Just trying to impress the family," she said, and turned back to the pot. Ethan walked in a moment later, kissed her cheek, and I looked away because something in my chest had already shifted. Over the next few weeks, the house became a storm of wedding chaos: flower samples, fabric swatches, cake tastings. My mom delegated everything like a general at war. Ethan worked late most nights, so Lena and I spent hours together finalizing details. It started innocently: shared coffee runs, long drives to the florist, inside jokes about how many shades of ivory existed. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to ignore how my pulse changed when she smiled. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. We'd gone to pick up centerpieces from a local craft shop, and a sudden summer rain trapped us inside. The world outside the window blurred into streaks of silver. We sat on the floor between cardboard boxes, surrounded by fake roses and ribbons. "You ever think weddings are just a performance?" I asked, half joking, half hoping. She tilted her head. "Sometimes. But maybe they're also a promise, even if people break them." The sadness in her voice caught me off guard. I looked at her, then really looked, and for a second she wasn't my brother's fiancée. She was just a woman sitting across from me, trying not to drown in something she couldn't name. And I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment: the rain, her eyes, the way she'd looked at me like she saw something familiar there. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Fleeting thought. A crush that would pass. But then came the little things: the text messages that lingered too long, the brush of her hand against mine when we walked side by side, the way she started sitting closer, like gravity was pulling us together. And then there was the night everything changed. Ethan was away for a work trip. Mom had gone to bed early. Lena and I sat in the backyard wrapped in a shared blanket, a bottle of cheap red wine between us. The crickets were loud, and the sky was full of stars that didn't seem to care about our secrets. She was quiet that night, softer somehow. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's story?" she asked suddenly. I glanced at her, surprised. "All the time." She smiled faintly, but her eyes glistened. "I keep wondering if this is what I really want. The wedding. The life everyone expects of me." The air between us felt heavy, electric. I could feel her breath when she turned toward me. "Lena," I said, my voice breaking. But she reached up and touched my face gently, trembling like she'd been wanting to for a long time. And before I could think, before I could stop myself, I kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was everything I'd been holding back: guilt, fear, longing, all crashing out at once. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were full of tears. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know." But neither of us moved. After that night, nothing was the same. We tried to pretend it hadn't happened. We didn't talk about it. She avoided me for 2 days, and I told myself that was good, that it should end there. But then she showed up at my door one evening, rain-soaked and shaking. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said. And I should have pushed her away. I should have told her to leave. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled her inside and we kissed again. Desperate this time, like two people trying to find something real in a world that would never let them. The affair, if that's what you'd call it, lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of stolen moments, whispered words, the constant fear of being caught. Every smile, every touch came with guilt, but I couldn't stay away. Neither could she. We met at a lake outside town. A quiet spot where no one knew us. We'd sit in her car for hours just talking about art, about how lonely it felt to live a life that wasn't yours. I used to dream about running away, she told me once. Just driving until the road ended somewhere new. Where would you go? She smiled. Anywhere you'd come with me. And that was the moment I knew I loved her. Completely. Hopelessly. But love like ours doesn't survive in small towns and wedding seasons. The breaking point came 3 days before the wedding. Ethan was at his bachelor party, and Lena and I were in the guest room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She was pale, shaking, her engagement ring on the nightstand. "I can't do this," she said, tears streaking her face. "I can't marry him, Riley." My heart pounded. "Then don't." She looked at me terrified. "And what? Tell your brother I'm in love with you?" I didn't have an answer. Because no matter how right it felt between us, I knew what it would destroy. "I'll leave after the wedding," I said finally, forcing the words out. "I'll go back to New York. You'll marry him. You'll move on." She shook her head violently. "Don't you dare say that. You think I can forget you?" I didn't answer. I just kissed her one last time, the kind of kiss that tastes like goodbye. The wedding day came bright and cruelly perfect. Everyone said Lena looked radiant. She smiled in all the right places, held Ethan's hand, said, "I do." I stood at the back of the church, heartbreaking quietly. When it was over, she caught my eye for just a second. A look no one else saw, full of sorrow, apology, and something deeper than regret. Then she was gone. Months passed. I tried to rebuild my life in New York. I dated, laughed, worked, pretended. But every so often, I'd see her name somewhere, a social media post, a holiday card from home, and the ache would start all over again. Until one autumn afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name. Inside, in her delicate handwriting, were the words that stopped my breath. I left him. I'm coming to New York. When I read her letter, the world stopped moving. It wasn't long or elaborate, just a few sentences written in Lena's careful, steady handwriting, but it hit like a storm. I left him. I'm coming to New York. I don't know what happens next, but I can't live a lie anymore. I stared at the page until the words blurred. My heart beat so hard I thought it might split open. For months, I'd told myself what we had was over, that it belonged to the past, locked away with everything else that hurt too much to think about. And now she was coming here, to me. Part of me was terrified. Another part, the reckless, still in love part, was already running through the possibilities. What if we could start again, without guilt, without secrets? I folded the letter carefully, as if it were fragile glass, and sat there in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, listening to the hum of the city below. Everything outside kept moving, cars, people, sirens, but for the first time in months, I felt something inside me wake up. She arrived 3 days later. I hadn't answered her letter. I didn't know what to say, or even if I should. But that didn't stop me from watching out the window like a fool all morning, pretending I wasn't. At noon, a knock came. When I opened the door, there she was, standing in the hallway with a suitcase and that same uncertain smile that once ruined my entire sense of balance. Her hair was shorter, her eyes tired, but she was still Lena. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." For a moment, neither of us moved. The city noise faded behind her, and I just stared, memorizing every line of her face like I'd been waiting for this moment in every dream. Then, without meaning to, I stepped forward and she fell into my arms. It wasn't a passionate movie scene kind of hug. It was quiet, trembling, full of exhaustion and relief. She smelled like rain and old coffee. I could feel her heartbeat against mine, steady and real. After a long time, she whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." "You're here now," I said. For the first few days, she stayed in my spare room, a space barely big enough for a bed and a window that looked out on a brick wall. We didn't talk much about Ethan or the past. We cooked, watched TV, walked to the corner cafe. It was awkward at first, like relearning how to breathe around each other. But there were moments that cracked the silence. Like the morning she found my old sketchbook and smiled. You still draw? Sometimes, I said. Mostly when I can't sleep. She flipped through the pages and paused at only quick charcoal sketch of a woman's hands holding a coffee mug. This is me, she said quietly. I looked away. Yeah. She closed the book gently, eyes glistening. You kept me. I wanted to tell her I'd never let her go, it really, but the words stuck in my throat. Eventually we talked about him. It was late one night, the city glowing outside the windows, both of us sitting on the couch with half-empty glasses of wine. I tried to make it work, she said, voice small. I thought maybe if I tried harder, loved him harder, it would stop feeling wrong. I didn't interrupt. But every morning, she went on, I woke up feeling like I was living someone else's life. Like I'd stepped into a part one didn't audition for. Her hands trembled. I reached out, hesitated, then took one in mine. She looked up at me, tears catching the light. You ruined me, Riley. The words hurt, but the way she said them softly, almost like a confession, made it impossible to be angry. Then we're both ruined, I said. She gave a broken laugh. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Over the next weeks, something quiet and fragile grew between us again. Not the feverish desperation of before, but something more honest. We went on walks through the park, cooked dinner together, talked about the future in cautious, maybe kind of possible ways. There were still ghosts between us, me brother, the wedding, the lies, but for the first time, the guilt didn't drown us. One Saturday we took a train upstate to a little art fair in a small town. The air smelled like cinnamon and pine. She tried on handmade rings at one booth and turned to me, smiling shyly. Do you ever think about what it would have been like if things had gone differently? All the time. And now, she asked. I thought for a moment. Now I think maybe this right here is how it was always supposed to be. Messy. Complicated. Real. She didn't answer, just slipped her hand into mine. That night, we stayed at a small inn above a bakery. I couldn't sleep. I kept watching her breathe in the soft light from the street lamp outside. There was no grand declaration, no movie-perfect moment. Just her hand finding mine under the blanket, a quiet squeeze, and the kind of peace that comes only after surviving something that should have broken you. But love never travels in straight lines. 2 months later, Ethan called. I hadn't heard from him since the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but guilt made me press accept. Riley, he said, voice strained. Is she with you? My throat closed. Yeah. He was silent for a long time. I figured. She left without saying much. I just thought I needed to know she's okay. She's okay, I said softly. Or getting there. I guess I always knew, he said after a pause. Even before the wedding. The way she looked at you. I couldn't speak. I'm angry, he admitted. But I don't hate either of you. I just wish you'd told me. I'm sorry, I whispered. Yeah, he said. Me too. The line went quiet. For the first time I felt something loosen inside me, a thread of forgiveness, fragile but real. When I told Lena about the call, she cried. Not the kind of crying that asks for comfort, but the kind that comes when you finally stop running. Later that night we went for a walk through the city. The air was cold, our breath visible under the streetlights. She stopped at a crosswalk and turned to me. Do you think we deserve this? After everything? I looked at her, the woman who'd broken my heart and healed it in the same lifetime. Yes, I said. Because love isn't about deserving. It's about surviving the truth. She smiled through her tears. Then I guess we survived. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. We still had scars, awkward calls from family, and quiet moments where guilt tried to crawl back in. But slowly the noise faded, replaced by the small rituals of being together, morning coffee, late-night laughter, the rhythm of something real. One morning, months later, I woke to find her standing by the window, hair tangled, sunlight spilling around her like a halo. She turned, eyes soft. You know, she said, I used to think love had to be perfect to be real. And now I think it just has to be honest. I got up, crossed the room and kissed her forehead. Then we're finally honest. She smiled. Finally. A year later we moved into a bigger apartment, a place with light in every room, and a balcony covered in plants. Sometimes when the city was quiet and she sat sketching at the table, I'd catch myself thinking about that first summer, the lemonade glasses, the chaos, the impossible love that somehow found its way back home. People like to say forbidden love never lasts. But sometimes when you strip away the shame and the secrecy, what's left isn't forbidden at all. It's just love, raw, imperfect, and completely human. And that's enough. 2 years passed before I saw Ethan again. By then, Lena and I had built a small, quiet life together, the kind of life you don't notice growing until one morning you wake up and realize it's yours. Our apartment was always full of light and half-finished art projects. Lena freelanced from home, designing covers for indie writers and painting on weekends. I had started teaching again, running an art program for kids at a community center. It wasn't glamorous, but it made sense, like a piece that finally fit where it was supposed to. Some nights we'd sit on the balcony with tea instead of wine, talking about everything we'd lost and everything we'd found. Love, I learned, doesn't erase the past. It grows around it, like ivy around old brick, holding the cracks together, not hiding them. Still, some ghosts linger longer than others. It was a Tuesday when my mother called. "Your brother's moving back east," she said, her voice careful. "He got a job offer in Boston." "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "He asked about you." "About both of you." My breath caught. "He knows we're together?" "I think he's always known, honey," she said softly. "And maybe it's time you two talked." That night I told Lena. She listened in silence, tracing her finger along the rim of her mug. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Do you?" She smiled sadly. "Part of me owes him an apology. The other part thinks maybe we've all suffered enough." We didn't decide that night. But the thought lingered like an unopened letter sitting on the counter. Weeks passed. Then one crisp autumn morning we took a train to Boston. Neither of us spoke much on the ride. The city outside blurred into shades of gold and gray. My palms were sweating. Lena squeezed my hand without looking at me. When we arrived, Ethan was waiting at a small cafe near the river. He looked older, tired, but calm. Time had softened the anger in his face. When he saw us, he stood, hesitant but smiling. Hey, I said. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "Hi, Ethan." For a long, awkward moment, none of us moved. Then he gestured to the table. "Sit, please." The first few minutes were small talk, work, mom, the city. None of us mentioned the past, as if afraid to break something fragile. Finally, Ethan leaned back and exhaled. "You don't have to pretend. I didn't ask you here for polite conversation." I met his eyes. "Then why?" "Because I'm tired of hating something I don't understand," he said simply. Lena's hands tightened around her cup. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," he said. "And for a long time I thought you did it to punish me, or to chase some fantasy. But then I realized you were just trying to be honest. And I can't hate you for that anymore." He turned to me. "Or you." There was no accusation in his voice, just exhaustion, the kind that comes after carrying too much for too long. "I loved you both," he said quietly. "And maybe that's why it broke me the way it did. But I also know that love isn't something you can control. You two found something real, even if it came from something painful. I guess that's life." My throat burned. "You don't have to forgive us." "I already did," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Otherwise I wouldn't be here." Lena started crying, then silent tears that rolled down her cheeks, one after another. Ethan reached across the table, handed her a napkin, and for a second, it felt like the three of us were back in another life, before everything had gone wrong. He glanced at her ring, the simple silver band she wore on her right hand. "You two happy?" I looked at her. She nodded through her tears. "Yeah, we are." "Good," he said. "Then I guess that's all that matters." We stayed for hours talking about everything we'd missed. There were laughs, long pauses, moments where the past hovered just out of reach, but by the end, something had shifted. The sharp edges had dulled. As we said goodbye, Ethan hugged me. It wasn't the stiff, uncertain embrace I expected. It was warm, real. "Take care of her," he whispered. "I will." Then he turned to Lena. "You two, take care of her." She smiled through tears. "Always." On the train ride home, the world outside the window was all orange leaves and fading light. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think it's really over?" she murmured. "The guilt." The past. I thought about it. Maybe it never ends. But I think it finally stopped hurting. She smiled, eyes half closed. That's enough. Life after forgiveness feels different. Lighter somehow. The things that once defined you, the mistakes, the heartbreak, they lose their sharpness. What's left is the quiet understanding that people are just people. Flawed, scared, trying. Lena and I built a rhythm that felt like home. We adopted a dog, learned to cook things we'd never heard of, and took road trips to places with bad cell service. Sometimes we fought. Sometimes we went days without saying much at all. But there was love underneath it, patient, imperfect, steady. One summer evening while watching the sunset from our balcony, she said, "Do you ever think we were meant to find each other that way?" I laughed softly. Falling in love with my brother's fiancée? Not exactly the meet-cute I'd planned. She smiled. But maybe it had to happen that way. Maybe that's how we learned what love really means. And what's that? She turned to me, eyes warm and certain. That it's not about the beginning or the chaos. It's about what you build after the storm. Years later, I'd think about that conversation when people asked about us. I never told them the whole story, just that we met under complicated circumstances and somehow miraculously found our way through. Because the truth is, love stories don't have to be clean to be beautiful. Sometimes they're messy and painful and full of bad timing, but if you survive them, if you choose to stay and grow, that's where the beauty lives. One winter morning, we visited my family for the holidays for the first time since everything happened. Snow fell thick outside the windows. My mom hugged us both like she'd been waiting years to breathe again. Ethan was there too, with someone new. A quiet woman named Claire who smiled kindly and didn't seem to carry old ghosts. At dinner, laughter filled the house again. There were moments when my chest tightened with memory, but then I'd glance at Lena across the table, and she'd give me that look, the one that said, "We're okay now." Later that night, as we helped clear dishes, Ethan caught my arm. "You know," he said, "for a long time I thought love was supposed to follow rules. And now," he smiled, "now I think love just follows courage." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks for forgiving us." He shook his head. "Thanks for showing me what honesty looks like." That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Lena and I stood outside under the stars. The air was freezing, our breath white against the dark. She slipped her gloved hand into mine. "We made it, didn't we?" "Yeah," I said. "Against all odds." She laughed softly. If someone had told me 5 years ago that this is where we'd end up, I'd have called them crazy. Same. We stood there in silence for a long time, watching the snow fall. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed, faint and lonely. I thought about how much had changed and how much hadn't. We were still those same two women who found each other in the middle of a storm. Only now the world had stopped punishing us for it. I turned to her. "You know what I think?" "What?" "That maybe love doesn't need to be forgiven. It just needs to be understood." She smiled, eyes glimmering. "Then I understand you. And I understand you." When we went back to New York, the city felt brighter somehow, even in winter. Lena started a small art studio with a few friends, teaching workshops. I finished a collection of short stories, all of them about love in its most complicated forms. I didn't tell her that one of them, the last one, was ours. On the day it was published, she found the dedication. "For the woman who taught me that love can be both a wound and a home." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "You wrote this for me?" "Always." She kissed me then, soft, steady, no guilt left in it. Just two people who had walked through fire and come out the other side. Sometimes, late at night, when the city hums quietly below us, I remember that first moment, the sound of glass shattering, the shock of lemon on my hands, the way she looked at me, and everything changed. If someone asked me now whether I regret it, I'd say no. Because every broken thing that led us here was worth it, every mistake, every ache, every impossible choice. We didn't find love the right way, but we found it. And in the end, that's what matters. Epilogue. Years later, at an art exhibit, a young woman stopped me. "Your work," she said, pointing to a painting of two women on a porch swing at dusk. "It feels like love and forgiveness at the same time." I smiled. "That's exactly what it is." She tilted her head. "Is it a true story?" I looked across the room where Lena stood, laughing with friends, light catching her hair like it always did. "Yes," I said. "Every bit of it." Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.